Who in here is not in PIC 16? You're not in PIC 16. It doesn't look like it. You're not in PIC 16? Okay, can you go to the other side? Whoever's not in PIC 16 needs to go to the other side of the left. This is PIC 16 only right now.
Did you explain like the signals and slots process? I don't know if I understand it.
Alright, so there's two mechanisms for responding to things that happen in a GUI. One of them is called events, and that's usually we're going to use that. I'm not sure if there are other cases. I might think of them later. One case where you're going to want an event or respond to an event is a paint event. That's when the system deems it worthy to repaint what's in your GUI. We're not talking about that right now. That's something that's often out of your control. Events are things that are often not in the users, as the person is clicking, or the coder's control. You can force events to happen, but in the case of the paint event, that's something that happens when the system decides that it's time to happen. Signals and slots, on the other hand, are used when you have a widget, say a button or a slider or something like that, and the user is interacting with it, and you want something to happen because the user interacted with it. And so every widget, buttons, sliders, I give an example in a video for next time of dials, similar to sliders, checkboxes, drop-down lists, they all have signals that they will fire whenever the user interacts with them. Push button, for instance, whenever the mouse is pressed over a push button, whenever the button is pressed, whenever the button is released, whenever the button is clicked, that means pressed and released, then it fires a signal. It's kind of like events in Java, or I guess it's called that in Java, but we're talking about signals and PIC. So it fires this signal, and you need to connect that signal to a slot, which means you need to connect it to a function that's supposed to be called whenever that signal gets fired. So the way that you respond to things is pretty consistent. Every widget, so like widget name, whatever you call the variable, will have, you can access its signals by writing dot, and then you write the name of the signal. So it might be clicked or pressed or that sort of thing, so signal name. And then you tell it to connect, literally you just write connect, to, like the signal is like an object and it has a member function called connect. And basically you're telling the signal whenever you get called, whenever you happen, you need to call the following function. And you just write whatever the name of the function is here. You don't put an argument list. It calls it with whatever argument it wants to pass. Function to call. So it's the function name. And so whatever that function is, you might define it. You do whatever you want to happen whenever that signal happens. Do stuff. And that's how you respond to widgets being interacted with in GUI. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Kind of.
Kind of. It's still fuzzy.
Yeah.
Well, that's because you haven't had a practice with it yet. And you're going to get practice with it next time. This is our second. So last time we did like a very intro to GUIs. You didn't see any signals and slots. This time you saw a few more examples. One with events and one with a signal and slot. Next time is all about events and signal, actually all about signals and slots. So you're going to get practice with different sorts of signals and slots. Basically you'll find that on a widget's documentation, there's a list of the signals that can happen when a user interacts with it. If you want something to happen when the user interacts with it a certain way, you find the signal that matches that kind of interaction. And you connect it to a function that you want to be called whenever that happens. That's the best I can do talking. I'd have to show otherwise, but you'll get more practice tomorrow. Yeah.
So when we talk about when we are doing the message box, the close event method, we take two arguments. The first one is self, and the second is the event. And I don't understand how the event argument works with this one.
Gotcha. Okay, so message box, did you subclass it? I don't remember the example exactly. Did you subclass message box? Did you? Did I see it real quick?
Yeah.
Close event. All right. With the widget. Okay. So it looks like this. Oh, that's right. All right. So there was another example where you created a widget and then a message box popped up and it asked whether you wanted to close the window or not. And if you said okay, that would do something different. That wouldn't fire a signal. That would create an event called a close event. That indicated that the user is trying to close your widget. It's another way that signals are passed around. Signals and events are similar because they're both ways of making things happen in the GUI. And in this case, every widget, because the superclass widget has a method called close event. And its default behavior is to close the widget. Gets out of it. Closes actually the entire application, I think, is what will end up happening. But you have the option now of overriding that behavior. Basically, by rewriting this close event method, you are changing what happens when a close event is called. The default behavior, if you didn't write code subclass QWidget, was for it to close the window. You get to change what happens. You're overriding the behavior for a close event. I can't tell you a strict rhyme or reason to when you're going to be able to respond to things that happen as events, or when it's going to be signals and slots. You're going to see that maybe look in both places. If you're trying to make something happen, try to see if there's an event method, in which case you have to subclass that class and override that behavior, or you have to fire a signal and respond to it with a slot.
So the event argument is basically the call access signal, right?
Sorry, you asked about the argument. So in addition to the close event method being called, self is the first parameter, which is always casted because the second one is event. It is an object that represents the event that happened. It is an object that represents the close event. It will contain information inside it about what caused it. Maybe the user clicked this button. I don't know, it depends on what particular event it is and what information it will have. Usually you don't need to use that information. Sometimes you will, and so you can always look up the name of that class, like a close event. You can look for a close event object, and you can find out what information is passed in with that parameter if you want to use it. But usually you can get by without using it. One thing that will often happen, actually, mouse clicks. That's another event that we'll see. You're going to want to get the position that the user clicked out of that event. And we'll see that next time. Yeah?
Would you mind reviewing what the super function does again?
What super does?
Yeah.
Super is a built-in function that's used to call an object's functions from the superclass of an object. So if I'm writing a subclass of QWidget and I call super the super function, so what should my class be called? I'm calling that class, this is called my widget. Its subclass is QWidget. Often in our init method, we're going to end up calling super. The reason that we do it is because ultimately we're going to want to call QWidget's initializer. When we create a myWidget, this calls our class's initializer, but it doesn't call the superclass initializer. It calls the superclass constructor because it constructs the superclass object within our object, just like in other languages, but it doesn't call the superclass's initializer. So the widget part of the object is not initialized. So usually in our init method, we want to access the superclass part of our object. So super is used for getting a reference to the superclass part of our object. The superclass object that is kind of living inside our object. So we call it by saying the name of the current class, my widget. We also have to pass it self, usually, because this is a reference to the object we're trying to get the superclass part of. And this here evaluates to a reference, or a pointer basically, to the superclass object that's living within this object here. And then you can call its methods, because you've got a reference to it. So we are usually explicitly called init. Sometimes we'll see later that we're going to have to pass a parent sometimes, but don't worry about that for now. For now, this is the only place we're going to use super in the class, is trying to call the super constructor for the widgets that we're creating.
In your explanation, you were talking about initializing and constructor.
So there's a difference between a constructor and initializer in Python. The closest thing to a constructor in the Python language is the double underscore new double underscore method, I think. Yeah. We're not going to use that. We only use initializers, which after the object is created, sets it up. So just like in other languages, when we create a my widget, first thing that happens is a Q widget is created. And all the Q widget methods and fields are part of this, right? And then I like to visualize it as around it, my widget is created. And this Q widget kind of lives inside of this thing. So if you've ever taken a class with me before, you've seen this sort of diagram. And so what this does is normally self is a reference, self is a reference just to the my widget part of it. And we can get all the my widget stuff. If we called self._init, that would call the initializer of my widget. So we want to somehow get an explicit reference to this guy here, and that's what we use super for. This is what this gets us. It gets us a reference to the Q widget part, so we can call its init method. Set it up. Why is that necessary? Apparently there is some stuff that happens inside here that's necessary for QPainter to work. It's not necessary to make this GUI just appear on the screen, a window, but if you want QPainter to work, you need to initialize it. So I suggest memorizing that part. Yeah.
Can you have inheritance from two classes of be like Q widget and something else?
You can subclass multiple types.
How would you call the init for the specific one? Because you're
You
calling-
specify, oh yeah, shoot.
Because that always confused me. I figured it would be super Q widget, but it's your class. So how would you
Yeah.
specify the different classes?
Actually, maybe I've been doing this class that you're trying to call. I might be,
It works.
it works if you write Q widget.
Well, I can try it.
Let me double check on that, because typically we're not gonna have to do multiple inheritance. But you're right, I think there does need to be a way to disambiguate. You might maybe put in the name of the superclass that you're calling, so maybe this is Q widget instead.
If I did Q widget, it works.
It does work?
Yeah, it works.
So, I should probably look into more detail. I've only used super in a few cases, right? And so normally it works just fine to put the name of the current class and the instance of the current class. But in order to disambiguate between the two, it might be that you write, like if you have Q widget, you extend from something else. Maybe you write something, the name of the class, the name of the superclass. So the something part of self, yeah, that could be right. But for whatever reason, it's working now when we only inherit, yeah. So I should double check on that. Would you write me an email? Just to remind me, I'm going to forget by the time these questions are done. I should look into that. What else? What other questions before this? You probably want to know what the quick password is. I think I want to as well. You can give it a shot. I think that the quick password is I cute. Can somebody tell me if that works? It does? All right. Capital I, capital P with a space in between. That's how you're pronouncing I cute. And my watch is 12:16. We're down until 12:21. I, D, space, cute. Capital I. That exactly is the password. Oh, yeah, quiz is done. Any questions about the quiz? Okay, there were, a lot of you installed Python, have been using PyQ and have maybe had trouble so far because you might have found that PyQ 5 is installed on your machine instead of PyQ 4. So the way that you can downgrade to PyQ 4, because we need to use a common version in this class, and PyQ 5 is relatively new. Go to the command line, not the Python command prompt. Command line like terminal in Mac or on Windows, it's, type CMD in the start menu search bar. Conda install -d anaconda PyQ -4 equals 4. If you type that in, press enter, and say yes to all the prompts, that should install PyQ 4 and replace PyQ 5. And that should make things work for you. This is only necessary on your personal computers. These PIC machines have PyQ 4 installed, so that shouldn't be a problem there. I did confirm that super into this, you're supposed to put the current class of the object that you're trying to get the superclass reference for. And it does say that it can be used for multiple inheritance, but it doesn't say how you're supposed to disambiguate between which of the two superclasses. But yeah, the official thing is, and this kind of echoes what I've been saying, it returns a proxy object that delegates method calls to a parent or siblings of class of type. So, or type. Actually, which one is, I think that one's the type. Yeah. IQ? No, so if your IQ is the model.
But there's also not out there.
I'll take a look at your computer. All right, so there's plenty to work on for next time. You've got an assignment for next time. I was asked to post a video of what the assignment looks like. When it's done, I'll do that. No, just,
But let me know what you did inside. Like, I think I know what it is gonna be.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be that one.
Yeah.
and get rid of the class animation,
Yeah.
and just format. You're gonna take it once, you'll probably do it. You can also just type that in the console.
This is how.
Friday, I'll talk to you. That's next time. No, it's that starts.
Two currencies, 460. It's not as much.
Yeah, everybody does one this time today. Next time, I don't remember. It's not, what are you asking for? Why are you asking about the future? Is it for planning purposes?
No.
Okay, I don't remember off the top of my head. You sent me an email.